To Engage 8, your daily segment brought to you by the Blitz Podcast, bringing you 8 minutes of the hardest hitting news from across the league. So, since we only got those 8 minutes, let's dive right into it, and it's obvious. The news today that we're going to talk about a little bit on Engage 8 is the firing of Frank Reich over in Indy and the hiring of interim head coach Jeff Saturday. Absolute fucking shocker to everyone. Former NFL Network or former NFL Now analyst, worked for ESPN for a lot of years. Obviously was the center for Peyton Manning the majority of his career. So interesting strategy to say the least for the Colts. Let's start off with the Frank Reich firing. First off, what are your thoughts, man? Do you think this was the right move?
I don't know if it would be the right move as far as doing it mid-season, and then obviously the interim head coach that they went and got. We'll get to that in a second. But it was pretty much time for a change here. I think we're 5. That was his 5th This is his 5th season. They've had one playoff appearance. They had the fumble or the screw up last year in Jacksonville where they had the playoff spot. They locked up. All they had to do was beat Jacksonville at home. They end up losing, and my Pittsburgh Steelers get in. And then this year, really rocky start. No Jonathan Taylor. The Matt Ryan thing wasn't really working. The offensive line wasn't playing very well. And, as a result, Taylor wasn't playing well, then got hurt. Ryan sucked. Ellinger's in. Surprise, surprise. He sucks. The defense has all not been playing up to standards. So all around, this Colts team has been a pretty big disappointment this year, and heads got to roll. And they fired their offensive coordinator last week. And you go out, you put up 3 points after that. It's kind of hard for the blame to be pointed anywhere else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you mentioned it, his 5th season over in Indy. He was brought over as the offensive coordinator in Philly to Indianapolis, but it seems like his head coaching tenure in the NFL is now over. Do you see him ending up anywhere? Any good spots for Frank Reich in your mind?
Like head coach
OC.
Jobs or offensive coordinator
OC.
jobs? OC, I mean, we should have an opening this offseason, so I would love to see Frank Reich put a Steelers uniform or a Steelers shirt on and coach for us, because he is a good mind. Obviously, he architected that offense that ended up going to the Super Bowl. Nick Foles took the Eagles to a Super Bowl off that offense, and over the past few years, it hasn't been great in Indy, but it hasn't necessarily terrible. I know Nick Sirianni was a big part of that. Now he's with Philly, ironically enough. But yeah, there'll probably be a couple offensive coordinator jobs that are open next offseason. I'm sure teams will be lining up to hire him because he is still. I do think generally he's a good coach. It's just a matter of maybe this wasn't the best situation for him to be a good coach in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's offensive coordinator jobs open up every day, it seems like, across the league, especially in the offseason. I mean, the Commanders, Scott Turner, doesn't seem to be hacking it right now. So Frank Reich could definitely end up in Washington, too. We actually got a question here. What are teams' records the following game after going through a coaching change during the season? I actually don't know that. But that'll be something to look into on our podcast episode tomorrow. But we'll dive into that. Let's dive into Jeff Saturday, though, man. Like, this is probably the most bizarre interim hire that I've ever seen. Like, when's the last time an interim head coach came outside of the organization?
Yeah, I don't remember the last time that happened, and especially one that doesn't have any NFL coaching experience whatsoever. I feel like this might be the first time that has ever happened, ever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was like rumors going around that Josh McCown, who had never coached in the NFL before, might get a job this past offseason. So it seems like a little bit of a trend of big name. I mean, I don't know if you could call Josh McCown a big name, but big name former players stepping into coaching roles. I mean, you see Reggie Wayne, he's now wide receiver coach with the Colts, and then Wes Welker, he's now wide receivers coach. So you see a lot of these former athletes that we saw play now stepping into coaching roles. He does have some high school coaching experience, but very interesting to say the least. I mean, it feels like a Jim Irsay hire. It feels like a, hey, let's try to encourage our fans that, like, let's bring a little bit of greatness back. Like, I feel like this was a fan base hiring. I'm not sure what the move is from here. Like, it just seems like the thought process was, oh, our O-line, who should be really good, is playing like shit right now. Let's bring in one of the best centers in Colts history to help and fix that. I don't know if that's the right way to approach it. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't understand. Obviously, like you said, this feels like our O line stinks. Let's go bring in this O lineman that I had as a player a few years ago that coached his kids high school football team. They have Gus Bradley and John Fox, both previous NFL head coaches. Their staff decided to foresee them. They also had another guy in Bubba Ventrone who's like might be looking at head coaching jobs this offseason. They go past him as well to bring in Jeff Saturday to finish the season out. That feels like the nail in the coffin. If there wasn't already one, if there already hasn't been like 7 for the Colts season, this feels like it's over now. Like Jonathan Taylor's still banged up. You're going to your 6th round quarterback. The defense isn't playing up to standard. The offensive line isn't playing up to standard. It feels like just for show at this point. It doesn't feel like they're going to try to win games this year. And honestly, I don't blame them because you've been doing this quarterback carousel for the last few years. You've got a new starting quarterback every year since Aaron Luck surprisingly retired, and you finally have a first-round pick again in a quarterback class that is pretty loaded at the top. You have the potential to be at the top of that class and get one of those guys, and this roster's ready to go. If you go up and get a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young or somebody like that can come in and impact right away, they can be a playoff team again next year. It's just a matter of getting that draft pick to do so.
Yeah, for sure. Last thing to say before we wrap this Engage 8 up. Assuming that Jeff Saturday maybe isn't the long-term coaching solution in Indianapolis, do you have any guys in mind that might be a good fit over the offseason for the head coaching job in Indy?
Yeah, it just kind of depends on who becomes available. Like every year we see offensive coordinators and head coaches become available. Ken Dorsey is like the first name that comes to mind, the offensive coordinator for the Bills. Obviously, he's been doing a great job in place of Brian Dable, who's now with New York. I could definitely see him getting a job signed. Really, you just take some of the good teams like Chiefs. Eric Bieniemy could be a guy. Whoever the hell's Eagles offensive coordinator is, I'm blanking on his name right now. But like teams that are doing really well, the coaches are coaching really well. These become hot names pretty quickly, and then obviously the guys that get fired for whatever reason could also be in play.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely some college names in play, probably. Joe Brady, maybe, possibly. I mean, I know he just went over to Tennessee, but, I mean, they're doing better than they ever have before, so he could make the jump to the NFL with his buddy Joe Burrow. Bill O'Brien has also been a name floated around for a long time, so we'll see what happens in Indy as far as the head coaching goes, but Jeff Saturday, the coach for the Colts for the rest of the year, let's hope he does solid over there, but that does it for our 8 minutes of Engage 8 today. We'll catch you tomorrow for another daily segment.